2, 3, 4. Hello friends, and welcome back to Swift Guitar Lessons for another lead guitar tutorial. In today's session, I'll be breaking down my approach to soloing over uncommon chord transitions. These are changes that feature chords that aren't in a typical major or minor key. We're going to begin by reviewing the chords that are in the key of E and how to solo over top of them using the major or major pentatonic scale. And from there, I'll show you how you can use the chord tones to reveal licks that you can use over a tricky change like E to G sharp major. You can pick up tabs and a study sheet for this lesson and all my other popular YouTube guitar lessons at patreon.com/swiftlessons. Now, let's get started. Okay, close look at the fretboard, getting started with section 1 of this lesson. What are the common chords in the key of E major? Well, the chords in the key of E major can be determined by performing the E major scale. Remember, chord progressions, everything is always in reference to the major scale. The notes in that scale are E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. Then another octave, E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. In order to really get this lesson, you'll have to memorize those notes and their positions. Okay, so once you've determined the notes in the key of E, that scale can be converted to a chord progression. Okay, each of these chords contains the notes that you would find in the scale that you just played. So the first note in the key of E is E. That can be converted to a major chord. Okay, all the notes inside of this E chord are found in the E major scale. But you'll also find the notes that are in F sharp minor, the second chord in the key of E. Next, we'd have G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, D sharp diminished, and then you're back on the other side of the octave, E major. Okay, so what you just learned are all the chords that are in the key of E. Those are a bunch of chords, 7 chords that are guaranteed to sound good together. So if you're a budding songwriter, that is essential information. Alright, great. If you've studied those chords, you've memorized them, and also memorized the notes that are inside of them, you're ready to move on to section 2 of this lesson. What is the simplest way to solo over these chords? So soloing over these changes, regardless of the order that they come in on, is easy with the E major scale, or its simplified version, its 5-note version, the E major pentatonic scale. So no adjustments to the scale need to be made regardless of the chord you're playing over, because as I said before, all the notes that are found inside these chords are also found inside the scale. Okay, so one more time, that E major scale, I'm going to say the fret numbers so you can really get this down. We have our root on the 12th fret, low E string, 9th fret A, 11, 12, on the D string, 9, 11, moving on to the G string, we have 8, and 9 finishes the octave. So we're going to get that down first. Alright, from there we're going to have 11, then on the B string, 9, 10, 12, and then on the high E string we have 9, 11, and 12. Okay, so what you just learned are all the notes that you could use to jam over the common changes in the key of E major. So, an E chord rings out. G sharp minor. C sharp minor. B. Just like that. Okay, great everybody. So far you've reviewed the E major scale, You've learned how to play it in chordal form, learned a bunch about theory, and how to solo over top of those common changes. Now we're ready for section 3 of this lesson, how to adjust for uncommon chords. Okay, so this is when a chord jumps in that features one or more notes that's not featured in the scale, which may throw some of the less experienced lead guitar players through a loop. Okay, so learning how to play over top of uncommon chord transitions. The example that I'm going to give you is E major. And we're going to take the 3 chord, convert it from minor to major. All right, which has a much more bluesy kind of tone to it, especially if you take the pinky off and make it a dominant 7 chord. Okay, so in the original chord in that key, G sharp minor, we find this B note here. That note is found inside the scale, which makes it very easy to solo over. We don't need to change our position at all. We don't need to change anything about our licks or our scales to be able to solo over top of that chord. But if the composition calls for a major version of that chord, that B note comes up to C. And that is what's screwing up a lot of players, okay? This particular change is kind of the Achilles heel for a lot of blues guitar players. So much so that a lot of times when the solo comes, players will have the band just perform a simple version of a 12-bar blues rather than try to tackle this very troublesome chord. So we don't need to do that. What we need to do is adjust the notes in the scale or your lick to accommodate that new chord. Okay, so next I'm going to give you an example for what I mean. We're going to take the original chord change, E major, to the 3 chord, G sharp minor. I'm going to play you a lick that sounds good over that change, okay? And it's going to end in B. So here's E major, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, and there's the G sharp minor, which has the B note in it, which matches the note that I ended the lick with. Okay, very common lick. All right, so that was the 9th fret going up to the 11th fret. 9th fret of the G string, 11th fret, sliding up a whole step to the 13th fret of the G string, and then vibratoing the B note, 12th fret of the B string. Okay, and that will sound great over top of an E to G sharp minor change. Okay, now let's take that 3 chord and make it into a major. So we have the E chord come in. Maybe I'll walk it up. Now to play over top of that, I need to sharp that B. 2, 3. That right there is the secret to being able to play over top of just about any change. Consider the notes that are inside the chord. So that B was the minor third of G sharp minor. That C is the major third of G sharp major. Okay? And that'll work for any chord change, even the ones that are inside the key. Okay, so now you're getting used to the idea of looking inside the chords to find what's different about these uncommon changes, right? So the next thing I would suggest that you do is take a look at the notes that you have in the chords in its entirety, and in more than one position. So if I look and examine closely at this G sharp major or dominant 7 chord, I can see that there's a D sharp in there. Well, that's found inside the scale. So that's a really comfortable note to get to because it's right in the scale that we're used to, E major scale. So that'll sound great over top of that major 3 chord as well. All right, I can also look at this shape. This is the same chord, G sharp dominant 7. All right, and I can look at these notes and also incorporate them into my licks. Alright, because that was right inside of that chord. Just hammering on from 9 to 10 on the D string. And that's a little trick that I'm going to utilize in the lick of the week, which we're ready for. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the final section of this lesson. 2 simple blues licks that you can apply to E major and G sharp major. The first one's gonna sound like this, coming in on 4 and all right, so 1 and 2 and 3 and over the E chord. All right, so I slid up to the 11th fret of the D string, 9 on the G, 11 on the G, and right as the E chord comes in, I bend the 12th fret up to 13. All right, then I'm gonna play 9, 11, 11 on the D, and 9 on the G string in vibrato. I love that lick, very B.B. King. Okay, then, as that G sharp major chord comes in, I'll play. Okay, so that lick one more time, it's ushering in the G sharp major chord. Sounds like this. All right, so that began on the G string, 9, 11, 9. Slide up a whole step. Pinky goes underneath to that C note that we talked about. Matching the notes inside of that G sharp major chord. All right. Then we're going to slide back the way we came on the G string. 9th fret G, 11th fret D, and then hammer, hammer. That's 9 to 10 on the D string. You put all that together. All right, the perfect way to accent that major 3 chord coming in. Alright everyone, thanks so much for checking out this lead guitar lesson. I hope you found it informative and helpful. And thanks so much to my supporters at patreon.com/swifflessons. Up next, we're going to have a loop going back and forth between that 1 chord and that major 3 chord, E to G sharp major. And this brings me to my tip of the day. If you want to improve as a soloist, one of my biggest tips is that you practice jamming over top of individual changes. So don't bite off more than you can chew, practice and jamming over top of an entire chord progression. Instead, just focus on individual changes. Now, let's get practicing. 1,